Hello and welcome to today's event, What's a School's Role? Civic Education in a Digital World. We're pleased to have you join us today. This event is part of the Democracy Ready New York Coalition's New York Civic Learning Week webinar series. But before we begin, I would just like to say that I'm very proud of the Democracy Ready youth members who have spent the past few months investigating the topic of learning civic engagement in this rapidly changing online digital world. They've had weekly conversations with one another, with their peers that have brought in the varied perspectives from each of the different schools that they attend across New York State. They've interviewed each other on the definition of media literacy, how they are civically engaged on social media, and the misconceptions that the adults in their lives hold about tech, and in particular, lately, AI in schools. So today's event is a product of that hard work, and I'm really excited for this program that they've put on for you. So I'm going to hand it off to Ava and Leela to start us off.
Hi, I'm Ava Fung from Brooklyn. I went to Stuyvesant High School and now I attend Barnard College.
Hi, I'm Leela from Albany and I go to Shaker High School. And we'd like to thank all of you for joining this event, What's a School's Role? Civic Education in a Digital World. This winter semester, as youth advocates in the Democracy Ready New York Coalition, we've been focused on discussing and spreading our message of the importance of media literacy and responsible technology use to students in New York State. We are speakers for our generation, so we have focused on gathering perspectives, opinions, and questions from our peers regarding our experiences in a world where artificial intelligence and technology are highly integrated into daily life. We interviewed our classmates to understand the impact of technology on the lives of high school and college students from across New York State, and through our conversations, we have uncovered that the presence of AI and technology in and outside the classroom brings concern and wonder. As a young generation, most of us can envision how tools like ChatGPT, Grammarly, and AI tutors can make us more engaged thinkers and learners. Yet we also know how algorithms can influence our minds in ways that harm our mental health, worldviews, sense of empathy, and capacity for deeper insight. We know that unmoderated use of AI tools in schools may take away valuable opportunities for student led discovery and harm academic integrity. Additionally, through our interviews, we learned that media literacy and media literacy education for all New York State students is not as comprehensive as it should be, considering the deluge of information young people engage with day in and day out. As expected, there are monumental decisions for legislators and administrators to make when it comes to AI moderation in our lives. But with Democracy Ready New York, we will continue to search for solutions on how we, as students, can balance AI and human potential in the classrooms and the realm of student-led civics.
During this panel, we have the privilege to call on brilliant intergenerational minds in the AI and education space who are truly pioneers in revolutionizing the digital world. We will begin with a youth tech activist panel with representation from youth-led organizations, AI Consensus, Encode Justice, and Civics Unplugged, who will lead us in a conversation about the kinds of skills young people need to develop to navigate a technology-focused world. We are grateful to the Responsible Technology Youth Power Fund for introducing us to these leaders. Following this, we will hold an interview with Democracy Ready New York member, media literacy educator, and director of curriculum and staff development at Project Look Sharp, Sperry, who will share his perspective on how the field of media literacy education has evolved over time within schools. Then, to complete the event, we are honored to have the chance to interview New York State Commissioner of Education, Betty Rosa, and ask her to share her insights on the intersection of technology and civic education and how we can specifically and reasonably implement such initiatives into schools. But first, let's hear what students from across New York State have to say about the misconceptions adults have about their use of tech and how if they've had discussions about civic participation online in their schools.
I wish like adults would stop having like a stigma against social media use, especially among teenagers, because they'll come up to you and they'll be like, oh, you've been on your phone all day, no wonder you've been so moody. But then that like makes the child not want to talk about their issues, especially, and it makes a lot of them like continue to stay addicted. So like, you know, adults do better.
Because I feel like a lot of family members think, oh, all your problems are caused by your phone, which sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not caused by my phone. And it feels kind of invalidating sometimes for people to just say like, oh, this is what's happening, when it's not really what's going on. Like, there's other stuff that's unrelated to technology that you're just kind of ignoring because you have a convenient thing to blame for it.
We are wasting our time, so like they're not wrong in that. That's not a misconception.
Adults just really like think technology is some type of futuristic thing that they can't understand sometimes.
I wish they realized that like they don't use it as like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of teenagers use social media to be more connected to people who they feel similar to, because they don't feel comfortable like voicing their opinions in real life. And I think they use social media as like an outlet.
I think they think that social media is kind of like a game. Like when kids use social media, they use it in multiple ways. They use it to show off their own lives. They use it as a window into other people's lives, and they also use it to communicate. And I think that post-COVID, a lot of kids have fallen into a silo regarding social media as a form of like security, that they want to use social media to broaden their social network so they don't feel as overwhelmed when they go back out into the fray in real life.
Okay, so I think that they should know that technology makes it easier for students to do some stuff, like translating work, like find examples of what they need to do. So I think they should know that technology could be distracting them from that segments, but also it can help them. So yeah.
I think the idea that every student is using like an AI to cheat is probably pretty false. I think there are some students out there that are actually using it to enhance their writing, not blatantly plagiarizing.
A lot more kids than they think use it in a responsible way to learn. And like when you go to public schools and you see how they make certain sites inaccessible or they ban certain things, it's because they're looking at it from the perspective that this is going to be abused. And that takes away the opportunity from the kids that don't want to abuse those resources.
Okay.
Yeah, in my history class, we also like have discussed social media use. We have talked about the algorithm and why it's so addicting, and also how it helps, you know, civic engagement through the platform, as well as like, you know, Greta Thunberg, Instagram. Like, I think social media is very beneficial for like student advocacy.
At this moment, I cannot remember any conversation that we have had about that topic, so I don't know how to answer your question.
Close to none. When we were younger, we used to have a lot of seminars about internet safety, but we were at such a young age where we didn't really take it seriously. Like, we barely even knew what the internet was. And I think as we get older, they realize that we're even less impressionable now than we were when we were young, so they don't bother trying to belabor that point anymore.
Well, we use social media in like my school to like connect it to like whatever topic we're discussing. Like, for example, in AP World, we were talking about conflict, and a lot of us were talking about how social media allowed for people to have a broader understanding of like what's going on in like Israel, because a lot of news sources can be biased or like not like tell the information accurately. So like having social media, you have like access to more different types of information, even though it might not all be accurate.
I believe like in my history class, like we do like current events, but I feel like students, I don't think I speak for everyone, but I feel like most of our class doesn't necessarily read the news day to day. I know some people do, but if it's like for an assignment, then I feel like people read it. With communication and whatnot, we've had discussions in English class about AI and social media and the presence social media has on like every student in our class and how like social media is made for people to just keep scrolling and to stay on that app.
Interestingly, yeah, we've actually been talking about it a lot for the past 2 weeks, and especially now. I think we have been getting into especially how we use it more personally. Everyone uses some sort of social media, and I think the idea of getting more awareness of what content you're feeding yourself and being aware of it is something that we've been discussing about, and possibly we've also been discussing about like how it's used by the larger scheme of this. Like it's not just, and the idea of being aware about that you're not entirely in control when you're using social media. And this is something I knew beforehand, but I continue to emphasize, and like in this discussion was highly to emphasize that it is a large money making scheme that I think, and especially I think the main thing is like nowadays it's like for especially our age group, it's you are on your phone and the entire time. Like these apps, I think an awareness about these apps is what is meaningful about these discussions, like how they're designed kind of hook you in and what their actual purpose is. So yeah, I think we're having a pretty thorough discussion on that.
There's little discussion about that. We don't really discuss that in class, yeah.
In my psychology class, we were talking about online bullying and like how exposure to technologies affect our mental health. And we use the media in multiple classes, like for projects to spread awareness on certain issues in the world, like global warming.
Now that I'm thinking about it, we did have a dramatic news. Like we had like current events days in class, and it was just like engaging with the media. But like now that we're talking about like social media and tech, like I got a lot of information from social media, which is kind of, it's not ideal because there's always false news or misinformation on social media and people trying to push out an agenda. But you know, when it comes to education, kids get that through schooling, American schooling. And if we're not talking about these issues in the world or just in life in general in the classroom setting, kids need to find these answers elsewhere, which is why they engage social media, which is why they engage to just other outlets.
I'm Ashley, and I'm a recent graduate from New Rochelle High School and a current freshman at the University at Albany.
And my name is Zagar Carino, and I'm a senior at W.D. Clark High School. Nardos Mangesha is a high school senior and the director of education at Encode Justice, the first and largest youth-led coalition advancing ethical AI. She has worked in local, state, and national level politics and policy making since she was 14, and has had her work in AI education policy presented at education conferences, as well as ranking nationally as an accomplished debater. Equally as passionate about STEM, Nardos is also a scientific researcher, receiving an international award for her work in Alzheimer's disease in 2023, and receiving early support for her current work regarding environmental pollution with herbicides.
Leo Wu is an economics student at Minerva University. He co-founded and runs AI Consensus, a student organization working on the integration of AI in education, with a focus on practical usage and a student perspective. Outside of this, he loves all things apps and music. In today's ever-evolving digital landscape, artificial intelligence is taking the lead, reshaping how people interact with technology. This era of rapid technological advancement has been accompanied by an increase in political activism online, as public platforms have become an arena for shaping public opinion. As we navigate this transformative period, it becomes crucial to examine the role of education in equipping individuals with the skills necessary to thrive and participate actively in this new environment. With this context in mind, I'd like to pose a question to each of our panelists. Where do you see the intersection of civic education and technology?
I guess I can go ahead and take this question first. First off, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. As for the intersection of civic education and technology, I think this takes really two different routes. The first route itself being how technology has intrinsically changed how civics itself works. And so that changes the education itself. And so in that sense, we see that technology, especially with social media, as of late has really changed how even our government works. Our government has been a lot more focused on passing these social media bills. We just saw yesterday that the House passed a bill to ban TikTok under this unless they sell it to a US owned company. And so when we're seeing greater government involvement in technology regulation, which is nothing to scoff at, honestly, it's kind of at a level we haven't seen before. And I think the other route that the intersection of civic education and technology takes is within the classroom itself, of course. And with the video that we just watched with the interviews from multiple different students, we see these varying perspectives. I heard some people mention things about AI and cheating and all that, but I personally believe that AI and technology can be really integrated into the classroom to make for a better learning experience, especially with civics education, I think. And there's a lot more to elaborate on that, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, and if I can just, I mean, first of all, amazing to be here as well, and very excited to talk more. I think I agree with both things that Nardos just said. I would even add that maybe a third one, as in technology enabling civic engagement. Although I know the question was more about civic education, but I want to take this sort of as social media and these technologies that connect us, and that like AI enabling us to learn more about the world, enabling students and young people to be able to engage at a more high level.
Thank you. Our next question sort of builds off of that. What kind of skills do you believe students should be equipped with today in order to navigate misinformation online?
That's definitely a really big one. Obviously, the main perpetrator of that for, I'd say, like 2 decades now, since the rise of social media is really the biggest one for that as of now. And with that, we've seen a lot of campaigns for social media, stopping social media misinformation. However, with the proliferation of AI, that has only made the social media misinformation problem worse. We see things like deep fakes, they are definitely one of the most dangerous things in terms of, civics in general and civic engagement, because the thing about social media is, a deep fake of a candidate can get released, and before anyone can say, hey, that's not true, that's fake, essentially, that's AI generated, enough people have seen it to the point where it has already changed their psyche. It's already changed their perspective on the candidate. And that is really just how the human brain works. And algorithms exploit that. And that is really the biggest problem in terms of misinformation. And so in terms of how people can be equipped to kind of handle that and avoid misinformation, it's difficult, honestly, specifically with the thing with deep fakes. For a lot of people, unless you are, experienced with seeing multiple deep fakes and the signs of a deep fake, it is extremely difficult to tell apart from that, to tell those two things apart. So I definitely say that is one of the biggest dangers. It's one that I wish there was more focus on in terms of, at a national level, especially with a huge election coming up, and just in the future as well. So in terms of that, one, it's very difficult to tell it apart without some actual regulation. And two, I mean, you can look up some telltale signs of deep fakes and things like that, but at the end of the day, it is going to be really difficult to tell that apart. But I will say that other types of misinformation tend to be more common, like, just seeing a post that's just wrong. And, some apps will flag this, on X, I guess it is now, they'll flag it and say this has unreviewed information or something like that. But again, those moderators on these social media sites, any social media sites, are notorious for just not getting to these posts in time. And so in that case, I think my best advice that I can give, that I've used myself, is review all the information before coming to a final decision on your opinion. Don't rely on social media as your primary source of news. Rely on, for me, I like to look at a wide swath of news sources because whether we like it or not, everything's biased. There is no such thing as a non-biased news source. It really just doesn't exist anymore. So there are ones that are better, obviously, like Reuters, Associated Press are kind of the ones I can think of right now. But, get your news from everywhere, just not from social media as much.
Again, no. So I think you say it so well and you cover so much. I'll add, I think, two things. And well, first, I just want to reiterate, like, it is so difficult to figure out what is misinformation and what isn't. And it's because like social media is so good at being engaging and finding out what are the things that will attract our attention. And then even if you sort of figure out later that it was wrong, it's already implanted in your brain. And in that stage, you can sort of already take on the spies. So it's a very difficult problem to tackle. I do think the best thing that really people can do is to be critical. And that's much easier said than done, but it's that when you're looking at a source, especially on social media, but really any source, like when you're listening to me talk right now, I would say don't just take words at face value, right? This is what we're trying to teach kids through school is to develop critical thinking and to be able to evaluate whether claims are correct, whether how well this fits into other pieces of information that they have. So whether it's social media, whether it's even just a news source, I would like, people should be looking at multiple different sources and trying to see, try to make a conclusion for themselves. The other thing I want to add, which I think really makes this even more difficult, is the fact that we're seeing this with AI sort of daily, that it's getting better and better by the second. And like deepfakes, I think is the perfect example because what deepfakes are capable of is just increasing exponentially. And so one day a telltale sign might be, I don't know, like that someone's hair is in a certain pattern, but the next week that's no longer true. And they've created a better technology that no longer has that sign. So especially as we're seeing these advancements so quickly with generative AI, this is going to be a really difficult challenge, especially I think for policymakers and people in regulatory roles to keep up with.
I did just want to add what you said about the like pattern of the hair thing. It just reminded me of what's happening with Kate Middleton right now and how these people literally found in her photo like the alignment of her hand doesn't match up, her zipper doesn't match up. But I think that one thing I've noticed is that people tend to pay way more attention to like entertainment based things rather than a political thing. So they're way more likely to, like deeply analyze and use these skills we're talking about when it comes to things like entertainment, because I think people connect to that more than politics, because that's, the nature of politics tends to be really exclusionary. And so if we can find a way to make politics more open, I feel like people will take the time to go through, and civics in general, and take the time to like go through and do that same level of analysis they're doing for like a photo. So yeah.
That was very insightful. Understanding, as you said, proliferation in misinformation and the growing need to be critical of different sources, how might students themselves move forward and engage in responsible digital activism?
Leo, if you want to go first, you can take this one.
I think that, well, as I was saying earlier, like technology is really enabling a lot of this. If we didn't have social media, a lot of this activism would not be possible, right? I think someone in the video was talking about Greta Thunberg and like the following that she was able to develop was in very large part due to social media and due to these technologies that connect us. But again, the problem with, I think, being online is you also have all this misinformation and all these biases that sort of can take away from someone's ability to engage. And so I would just say that I don't have a great answer, but for students to just be critical and to really think about what is the best way they can present themselves to engage with an audience effectively.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, digital footprint is a really important thing. So first thing with digital activism is that, you know, activism in general, especially, I'm a big fan of grassroots organizing. I think, you know, getting out into the community is amazing. That's how you make deep, true connections, in my opinion, you know, like being with someone face to face. And the thing with digital activism is that you can make a post, you can write a post out, make a little Canva poster, and just hit send on the Instagram post, hit send on that story. And what this leads to a lot of times is people can say very brash things in the name of activism. Slandering happens a lot in the digital activism space from what I've seen. You know, you'll see these different accounts going at it with each other or just directly targeting other people. And so what that starts coming down to is almost a form of virtue signaling, because a lot of the time what you'll see with digital activism is people will say something, they'll be like, repost this and you know you're helping the cause. Are you really helping the cause? You most likely aren't, you know? So while raising awareness is extremely important, digital activism is amazing for that. It has kind of led to a slide in the direction of, you know, more slander, more polarization, especially more hate, um, and virtue signaling. I see that a lot. While awareness is important, when awareness is not followed up by action, there really isn't, it makes it worse in a way because you're a bystander at this point. And you know, even if it's donating to a reliable charity, I will add there are a lot of unreliable charities online. People will be like, put money into this GoFundMe, and you know, you're helping people, you know, who are hungry somewhere, people who are, you know, in a war ripped territory somewhere. And in reality, this is just going to someone's bank account. And so while independent journalism, independent activism has risen a lot with social media, and a lot of it is great, there are these really big downsides. And my warning would just be try not to get caught up in that, you know, find the truth. And if you want to get involved in digital activism, tie it in with some, you know, like real world connections, not things where you're sitting behind a screen the whole time, things where you're using a digital space to mobilize people, you're using a digital space to get the word out. But then you're saying, you know, come here and let's do an in-person protest. Come here and we'll go to this food pantry and we'll pack food to actually send to these places. And so, you know, the key here is making sure that digital activism is followed by a real world action, because you know, social media and the internet can just be so far disconnected. So that would just be, that's my take on that.
Yeah, if I can, that made me think of something else as well, which is, so I was watching this video, I forget who it's by, but they were talking about this difference between hearing something and truly listening to it. Which is, you know, you can hear sounds and words and you can read text on a screen, but to truly understand it and to engage with it on that deeper level is very different. And I think that's one of the dangers of social media, which is it really, you can do so much like engagement, you can go like all the posts, you can go comment, you can post this stuff yourself without truly understanding what it really means and understanding even the impact that you're having. So it's just like there's many different levels to social media, and it's very hard, I think, to get it right. Which is again, which is why it's so important to be critical about this stuff.
Thank you so much for your insightful responses. We're going to move on to our next question. What do you think a school's responsibility is in providing a civic education that has adapted to our digital world?
I think you know, schools have a certain level of responsibility in terms of this needs to be integrated into a current curriculum. A whole new curriculum does not need to be created, because obviously, public school systems specifically are extremely large scale systems serving a wide swath of students. And so it would be really unrealistic to expect, a really truly comprehensive change in curriculum in terms of with tech. But I think that there certainly needs to be a certain level of whether this is like teacher by teacher or school by school rather than on, like a district level, creating these kind of more personalized curriculums at a school level, whether I think history class is definitely a great place to include this, some level of history class, because at most schools, history is required all 4 years of high school, all years of middle school, et cetera, et cetera. And so, just putting that into certain, levels of curriculum, putting that into certain lessons. And this also extends to, College Board to do something, because College Board is the one that creates all of our APs, all of that. I think from them, it'll be a while to see any meaningful change because they create these tests and curriculums years in advance. So I think they definitely will be including something about tech at some point because it is just such a ubiquitous part of civics education at this point. So probably in AP government or AP US history, there will be something about tech, but I feel like we'll be seeing that by the time my sister is taking this class and she's like 11 right now. So it'll definitely be a while until we see something like that in terms of these more standardized classes, because APs and IBs are probably the only level of very standardized curriculum that schools can offer. And then other than that, it just varies district by district. Honors means something different, everything means something different. So I think the integration of tech and digital spaces into civic education is a really nuanced topic, and it's one that I think should be personalized from school to school, but it definitely should be there. But I also think it's unrealistic to expect something right away because it just does not really fit with the model of the public school system that is very large. But I do hope to see something soon.
Yeah, this is sort of a oversimplified view. But like schools exist in a lot of bureaucracy. And so for curriculum to get changed and for that to actually impact kids, that has to go through so many levels, which takes a tremendous amount of time. Meanwhile, technology is increasing and changing sort of exponentially and by the day, whereas changing curriculum in schools is something that takes months and years. So to that, I would say like putting the responsibility on school districts, as Nardo said, I think on that like highest level is quite difficult and sort of unrealistic just because you can't, it's almost impossible to keep up with how fast technology will change. So then I think where we can really see some of this most up-to-date engagement is with teachers, like individual teachers, individual schools. I would say that students themselves and young people themselves, having them have that motivation to go and figure this stuff out like on their own is the best solution. And so if we can see infrastructure built up, like communities having it be, and this is very hard to do, but having students really value being up to date with what's going on with technology and how they can engage with it, how they can be critical, how they can understand it well. That's sort of an end goal I think we can try to work towards. And like, yeah, so, yeah.
Thank you. Nardos, you did briefly mention incorporating technology into public schools, but how do you both envision the best way of integrating technology into K-12 schools to best enhance civic learning and engagement among students?
That's really funny because that was the exact, goal of my policy that, I created last summer. And so this is a big topic of interest to me. And if you can't tell yet, I tend to give long-winded answers. So I'm going to try and cut this one short. But for me, just like, as a high level overview, like I mentioned earlier, a whole new curriculum should not be created. That is just unrealistic and will most likely be ineffective, because if you think of, these courses are mostly going to be targeted at high schoolers in the first place. There will be some general tech education throughout, those preliminary years, but honestly, for the most part, in most public schools, that's already in place in terms of, what's your digital footprint? What are you doing on the internet? And, when you go to the library to get a lesson about how do you use search terms to look these things up. So there is becoming a problem with younger and younger kids getting on social media, which has caused, I don't know if any of you guys have seen the thing about, 10-year-olds in Sephora, which is it's a makeup store with, things that are over that it's very been perpetuated by social media. And so these 10-year-olds would not be in Sephora, a makeup store, if it wasn't for social media showing them these, 16, 17, 18, 20-year-olds, doing a get ready with me routine or something like that, and mentioning the products they got from this store. So all of that is very much perpetuated by social media, and there should be some level of education about that. But I think at a public school level system, most of the resources in terms of tech education and, a little more comprehensive tech education should be targeted as high schoolers, because at that point, students are more developed and are able to absorb the information better. And then, going off of that, the system at high schools is that you get to choose your courses, in terms of some of the courses that you take. And so if, let's say, some people who believe in creating a whole new course or a whole new curriculum for tech education, I kind of present the argument that if you are a high school student and you're looking, what are these courses that I can take? There is a very, very, very low chance that someone is going to choose that class about tech education. It just, for a lot of students, if you want to go to college and whatever you're interested in, tech education is probably not in line with that, even if you're interested in computer science or artificial intelligence. If you're someone who wants to go into, the workforce or apprenticeships, again, that's not necessarily something that really aligns with what you want to do in the future. And so, I was able to draw on this perspective as a high schooler myself. And so what I kind of concluded was that best practice would be to integrate this into existing classes. And I mentioned history earlier in the scope of civics education, but this should be really integrated into every class. So, if we use math class as an example, a lot of people have probably used things like photomath, mathway. Those are all a form of AI in some way, but AI hasn't really been, so that has already been abused in the past. If we're going to really think about it that way, that has already been used in these courses in a way. I just feel that a lot of people haven't recognized AI for what it is until it showed up in the form of a language, ChatGPT. And that is a very specific type of AI, that's generative AI. But if we're really going to look at all the types of AI and machine learning, it has already been incorporated into our education systems, albeit not officially, right? So a lot of students will use photomath, it'll be an application on your phone. You take a picture of your math homework and, it gives you an answer. That has been abused a lot by the students in terms of, a quick answer for this math homework, and has not been addressed by any education systems. And so now this really large push for, regulating this more in schools has come after ChatGPT, which I find really interesting given how prevalent AI-based systems have already been. And so back to my example about math, a teacher can use something like ChatGPT, or there are so many ed tech tools now. There's AceFlow. Conmigo is still in its beta testing, I think, but that one's run by Khan Academy, so it's definitely trusted by a lot of people. There are so many ed tech tools out there, and those will literally guide you through the steps of doing a math problem in comparison to an app where you scan something and it gives you the answer. And so, that as one example, teachers can use that to teach better in terms of, here, let's go through this problem. The AI will explain it, and then the teacher can go into it further. On the flip side of this, it makes teachers' jobs so much easier when they're able to focus more on individual questions that students have, because AI can personalize learning so much. It's just insane how much it can do this, because you can sit down at a computer, ask it a question, you can ask it the same questions again and again and again until you get it. And for a lot of students who are shy of asking questions in front of a teacher, shy of getting judged by other people for asking a question, this is a great tool. And they can also go to their teacher whenever they need extra help after that. So that's just like a few things, I think, in terms of how it should be regulated within schools.
All right, so we actually are cutting near our end time. So we're going to have our final few questions. How does AI impact your life personally? Do you notice a difference between choosing to engage with it versus when it is automatically there?
Yeah, maybe I can go first on this one. For me personally, I mainly use AI in terms of and I'm talking about generative AI, just in my learning. So like now when I go to do my sort of readings, often the first tab I open is honestly ChatGPT. And what I find is that it's sort of a chat partner, because what I can do when I go to do a reading, instead of tackling it sort of piece by piece, I usually ask ChatGPT to give me an overview first. And it's like sometimes my classes will have a sense of what's going to be covered, like what's the point of this reading. And then that allows me to use ChatGPT or other tools like that to connect it to terms that I know. And because it is a language model, it makes it a lot more accessible. So it's one of these things that I feel like it helps me just understand the reading better and engage with it at a deeper level. I do think that this is sort of dangerous, because like it's even hard for me to tell, and especially for me personally to tell when something that I'm doing with ChatGPT is actually benefiting me and when it's not. Because like take this example of the readings, something very easy to do is to paste in sort of all the text or paste in a link to it and just ask ChatGPT, please summarize this in 100 words. And then you can continue to ask questions. But I think usually what happens, and so the worst case is you take that summary, you fill in whatever question you have to fill in, and then you move on with your day. And what's happened is you've missed out on all of the learning and active engagement with that text. And then you, of course, you have the flip side where you can go through the text and ChatGPT can be there guiding and supporting you. And that helps you get a much deeper understanding of the text than you would have otherwise. But it's difficult to differentiate between those two scenarios and really understand what are the kinds of use cases, and which vary by person to person, but depending on their level of understanding, where AI is helping you and where it's not. That's something I think I continue to struggle with, and like I keep thinking about when I engage with the tools. And I think people like really the solution to this that I see is just for people to be more critical of that fact and to be trying to figure out the ways in which AI can most support them and not hinder them.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I really don't have much to add on this one. I think that's a really great answer. In terms of how AI impacts my life, I work directly in the AI policy space with Encode Justice. And so for me, I feel like I've been looking at a lot of this in retrospect in terms of, numbers, data, other people's testimonials. And I will say, for someone who is working a lot on AI, I don't actually use AI myself that much. I know a lot of people who do, but I feel like although I do know, how I would be able to use it effectively, I just find it for myself, just personally, I am able to, engage with different material better, whether it be through school, when I am able to go through it on my own. And so for me, well, if I missed an assignment or something, if I didn't do a reading and I have, a quiz the next block, yeah, I'll go on ChatGPT, look up a quick summary of the book, and then hope for the best walking into that quiz, right? But I think for a deep understanding of the material, it is so, so beneficial to go in there yourself and go through those thought processes yourself. And I feel like for a lot of people where AI can help is helping you go through that process. But for that, you need to know how to use AI effectively. You need to know some level of prompt engineering. What you say to AI is so important in terms of the output it gives you. And so that's why AI is so ineffective in terms of education right now, in my opinion. So for me, I don't use it as much, but I think it definitely can be a very useful tool.
Well, thank you very much to the both of you. And with that, we have come to the end of our panel. Now we will be moving on to the audience Q&A, and we have a few questions for both of you to answer. The first one is, can we improve social media by incorporating AI technology? And from your perspectives, how can this build informed and civically engaged students?
Right. So, I mean, in a sense, AI is already very integrated into social media because it's like Nardos was saying earlier, we think of AI as these LLMs, but really they've been around. I mean, sort of self-driving cars, like that's one of the, earlier versions of AI. So in the sense that they're already integrated and we've seen like the negative impacts of having this technology that can learn from us and adapt to our sort of the way that we interact with the platform to maximize our engagement. But I think it can very well work in the opposite way too, where if we can train AIs and if companies integrate it in a way where the sort of goals of the AI and our own goals are aligned, then it can be very beneficial. And so if you're thinking about like searching for something on social media, or trying to connect with people, and the AI is there with your goals in mind, and it's trying to help you and it understands you, that can be so useful. But the problem with, as we know, with social media, they're for-profit companies, and so often the incentives are not aligned. And so I don't know, practically, I think there's so much potential, but it'll be very hard to sort of implement and get right.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I feel like the really key thing you said there, these are for-profit companies. I think I'll just flat out say I think AI is making social media worse, a lot worse. When AI is put into social media, what that can do is this can also be external users using AI to, proliferate their social media terrorism, I guess, because people can go in, they can make this artificial intelligence code, which it might not even be at an AI level. It could be machine learning, some form of machine learning. It doesn't even have to be a whole model, right? They send this out. This can spam like thousands of bots across a platform with one click. This can send hate mail to thousands of users, one click. This can send misinformation out, one click. And this is all done because of AI. Additionally, as social media platforms start to use AI more, we see more and more misinformation, and we see more and more tailoring something to what a person continues to click on. And where this continues to be an issue is with things like news. And when news is combined with entertainment, as it so long has been, it just gets even worse with social media and AI. And so this just creates a feedback loop of confirmation bias over and over and over again. And it just deepens a divide that we see in terms of our polarized society, in terms of people can't communicate with each other anymore, because if they disagree with one another, they'll just completely shut down, and they're not willing to listen to other perspectives. And so AI has made the problem of effective discourse and communication so much worse, because it's just showing people what they believe so that they can get a profit, so that the companies can get a profit, because we want to be told that we're right, essentially, but we're usually not right. One person's opinion is almost always not probably going to be the best one, and the best choice for society in general, the best thing put forward for society, and I'm talking about this in the context of politics, is always going to be when there's some level of negotiation. And social media just completely takes this away in terms of, you know, how it presents news and things like that. And AI just only makes it worse because it automates the whole entire process and just makes it so much easier for people to just, you know, spit out a ton of misinformation.
So for our second question, where I work, there has not been great engagement from students in such programs offered in a traditional class format. What are some innovative or creative ways to get student engagement?
Oh, sorry.
You can go.
I don't know. I love this question. Because and I sort of will ask you back, whoever asked this question. Like, and you mean like traditional formats, as in within the curriculum, and sort of these institutionally, I guess, set up civic technology kind of things. Because I guess sort of from the perspective of a student, my experience has been that most of these things are kind of outdated, and you're there not because you want to, but because someone is forcing you to be there. And then usually the feeling that students have, I think, is why do I need to pay attention to this? I know more than they do about this. Um, this is just silly. Why I shouldn't need to be learning this stuff. But I think that to me is sort of the way that we can get around this, which is if we can create activities which really ask the students to be the teachers and to sort of put the power in their hands to teach each other what they know, and to even teach sort of the teacher or whoever's leading the session. Because I think something that's really powerful is when students feel like they have an opinion and that their experiences and what they know really matters, and that they can contribute something valuable to the discussion. So one thing that we've done recently with AI Consensus is we were curious about how students are using AI. So like, what are the specific ways and use cases in which they're doing this? And so what we did is we did a hackathon. We just basically asked people to come up with the best cases that they know. And I could see this being replicated in the classroom, where an activity could be getting the students on a topic like maybe even AI in social media, like that previous question. Instead of having a teacher or some kind of video that they have to watch, have them talk about it themselves, have them share what they individually have learned. And I think this really creates a lot more engagement and sort of a sense of pride from the students.
I apologize, Nardos, but we do have to end the panel here. Nevertheless, thank you so much to the both of you. We are very grateful for your attendance and, of course, for answering all of our pressing questions, as well as those of the audience. We thank you for providing your expertise today and for your work in the fields of AI ethics, technology, education, and, of course, civics.
Next, we will hear from Martine Dosa as she interviews media literacy educator Chris Perry.
Awesome. Thank you so much all for that incredible conversation. Your insight, Leo and Nardos, was incredibly interesting and definitely resonated with me a lot as a student. So yeah, to briefly introduce myself, my name is Martine Dosa. I'm currently a college student, but I'm a 2022 graduate of Syracuse City Schools. Born and raised, I'm here right now for spring break. I've been involved with the student branch of the DemocracyReady NY coalition for about 4 years now, which is insane. And I'm grateful to be here today in conversation with Chris Sperry. So thank you, Chris, so much. I can do a brief introduction before we begin. So as a classroom teacher for over 40 years, Chris developed the methodology of constructivist media decoding.
that is core to the Project Look Sharp approach to media literacy integration. Chris currently directs Project Look Sharp's librarians as leaders for media literacy, or ML3, initiatives. Chris taught middle and high school social studies, English, and media studies for over 40 years in the Lehman Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. He's the author of numerous curriculum kits related to global studies and US history, and he is co-author of Teaching Students to Decode the World, Media Literacy Across the Curriculum. He has also delivered hundreds of media literacy workshops, classes, and keynotes for educators in the US, Turkey, Iran, India, Kenya, Panama, and Bhutan. Chris is the recipient of the National Council for the Social Studies 2008 Award for Global Understanding and the 2005 National PTA and Cable Leaders in Learning Award for Media Literacy. So we clearly have an expert with us today. It's great to be in conversation with you. I'll begin with the question that we're starting each panel with, which is, where do you see the intersection of civic education and technology?
Thanks, Martine. Thanks, Democracy Ready. Wonderful to be here with you. It was just great listening to Nordis and Leo speaking so much of what's in my heart, but from a different generational perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have the facility that those young people just spoke with and that kind of immediate experience. So my role here is really to speak from a different generational perspective on, okay, having sat through, you know, when television was controversial in the classroom, you know, to today, you know, what does my generation have to offer, or folks who've been doing this work for a long time, and also recognizing what the young generation essentially must lead and have to offer around this work. So the question of the intersection of civics and technology, I think I'm going to shift the question, if I can, a little bit, because I think of technology as tools to be able to use not only in positive ways, but certainly in all different ways. And the focus that I want to shift to has to do with teaching and learning, that has to do with literacy, it has to do with communications, the role that technology play in our communications, our ability to be engaged with changing our worlds and being active participants in society, in our schools, you know, in our families, in our communities, in our nation, in our world. And that's what civics is to me in all different kinds of ways. Leo recently talked about, you know, really what we need to do is kind of turn the teaching back to the kids, to the students, you know, have them be engaged. And for me, that's going to be at the heart of any discussion of civics. So how can technology, and then I will continue to be talking about media and about literacy, communication, how can that support civic engagement so that students are, from the media literacy perspective, continually reading their worlds and writing their worlds.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I really love that idea of giving power to students in the classroom setting. So you talk about, you'll speak more about media literacy. I'm really curious to hear your perspective there, and also specifically how schools can promote media literacy.
So it was just great listening to the conversation. I mean, I had some plans of what to speak to and have completely shifted, you know, some of that based on listening to the artists. So you know, there's really good work being done in media literacy and has been for a long time around, for instance, the creation of media. An essential part of media literacy is students, young people using media themselves to actively engage in communicating their ideas, their messages, expressing themselves, critiquing society, changing society, and that's been spoken of already today. And there are many good organizations doing that work. If people are looking for particular organizations in any of these areas, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, or NAMLE, namely, has lots of great lists and annotations about different organizations. There's also organizations, people represented here, who are doing great work around AI, for instance, and around specific media forms. There's lots of organizations and work being done around safety issues and protecting our students. Cyber safety, something was referenced earlier, you know, in terms of internet safety and that. What I'm going to speak to today in terms of my experience connects to what I heard the young people speaking about is how can we integrate what we need to about media literacy across the curriculum from pre-K through high school in a way that gives agency to students, but that also gives them the skills, and I'm going to use the word the habits that they need for critical thinking of all media messages. AI is incredibly important for us to think about, but young people today still spend 4+ hours a day on what we would call video. What was once called television. Recorded music, incredibly important and influential. So we can't just forget, the old media. So books, still important media in the classroom. So how do we give students, in Leo's word, put them in the center of the teaching with each other about these media issues? And that's the work of Project Look Sharp, working with librarians around the state and around the country, training teachers to, whenever we use any media or technology in the classroom, to also think, I need to also be asking questions. And the question might be as simple as this: is this credible or not? Or who made this and for what purpose? Or what impact might this media form have on the message? Or who might benefit and who might be harmed by this message or by this technology? Or how do I interpret this differently and see this differently than the person next to me? What might I learn from thinking about somebody else's, but I also want I learn about myself and the way in which my own identity impacts how I interpret these messages. That can be done in a kindergarten class studying nutrition and how we look at food packaging, to think about, is there fruit here or not? And why do we think there's fruit? But how would we know if there's fruit in this or not? And to think about, why would they put fruit there if there's no fruit in it? And so getting at credibility issues, or as we explore memes, in high school English, to think about who made this and for what purpose and why are they presenting this and what's their perspective? How do I interpret and how can I? So if we can get teachers, whenever they use technology or media in the classroom, to say, I also need to ask questions. And then I'll end with this one. That I not only am going to ask questions, I'm going to listen really well to what students have to say. And I am going to think about where that student said something that's really essential for understanding what we're studying in science or in math. So instead of now saying, great, this is an opportunity for me to say yes, and then tell you, this is an opportunity for me as a teacher to say, tell us more about that.
Yeah.
What would you say that? Does everybody agree to this? And turn it back to the students to teach each other, because we know it's more effective that way, to inquire and ask questions, to be curious, so that ultimately, if we can develop habits of questioning across the curriculum in all subject areas through the way in which teachers use media in the classroom, which they're using all the time, we can then prepare students for the new media forms beyond AI that we can't even anticipate, because they are asking some of those essential questions which will transcend some of the aspects of new technology. There will also be unique aspects of AI and the two technologies that are coming, as well as books and paintings, et cetera, that we need to explore independently by that question of what are the qualities of this media form? And how is that unique? And what are its strengths? And what are its challenges? And what do we need to be aware of? So long-winded answer to your question.
No, I appreciate it. And it makes me think, I would imagine that it's sort of like the phrase inquiring minds want to know, that asking all of these questions also not only improves student learning, but also just the classroom environment and climate. It's more engaged. Students are excited to learn from one another. Have you found that to be true, either as your experience as a teacher or
I'm
as a
glad
leader?
you honed into that. What made you say that? Why do you think that it would be more engaging for students?
I think, I can think of my own experiences in high school with teachers that did exercises that were more, I guess, like dialogue focused, where students could learn from one another and our experiences. It felt more, I think, natural sometimes, and I think also it also made me remember some themes more. If I could connect a topic in English class to an experience I had last week, I think it makes the lesson more memorable too.
You know, there's a lot of research about the fact that if students really are trying to solve a problem, they're inquiring genuinely about that, that the likelihood of them really learning and holding on to it is just much more significant.
Yeah.
I'm going to get up there and I'm going to tell you the answer to this question. You know, I'm going to put it on the board and expect you to repeat it back on the exam. But in fact, if we can learn to shift our teaching to be more inquiry-based, more question-based, focused on student curiosity and motivation, but mostly we can listen to how students make meaning of their world, and we can cue into that and have students teach each other, it shifts the role of teacher from being the person who is the authority in the classroom to tell you what's true, and you're supposed to write that down and repeat it back to us on the exams, to not the teacher's the one who knows the kids really well, knows them, can read their body language, knows their backgrounds. And there's an infodemic of information. Our issue, our thing is not to get you the information. It's to help facilitate how you think about that information. And really importantly, how you think about your own thinking. So Nardis talked about confirmation bias. AI is a really great example. We know we've crossed the Rubicon where you can no longer, oh yeah, here are the techniques and strategies for figuring out if this is a deep fake or not. Well, you can go online, you can search laterally and look for that. But what's really critical is when our young people look at an image, they are thinking, is this accurate or not? How would I know it's accurate? Where would I go to figure that out? But even more, equally important, where is my critical thinking weak? Where do my confirmation biases make it more likely for me to believe something that's not true and share that and pass it on to others? That's not built into the New York State standards, other than in early elementary, students reflecting on their own emotional responses and why. We need to build it into science, into social studies, and into health, and into math, and all areas to think about our own thinking about a myriad different kinds of issues and content that we're teaching. So that metacognition is another arena that media literacy can help build in, and it's going to be absolutely critical with AI so that our students have the habit of thinking, oh, yeah, I'm drawn to that one. I'm likely to pass that on, but I'm going to pause for a minute and think whether I should or not, because that fits what I believe. So my motivated reasoning draws me in that direction. I'm onto myself. I recognize it, and I want to stop. So.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you. That's fascinating. I think I'm also curious in thinking of how media literacy, I think it's probably been a theme that some teachers and librarians have been thinking of for a while, but my guess is it has changed a lot, especially in recent decades as technology has just like evolved more and more and more. I'm curious if you just have any reflections over your career so far, of how media literacy has changed and sort of what it looks like in this moment.
Well, I love being able to do this with a cross-generational group. And, you know, let you know that when I started teaching in 1978, in the wonderful little progressive public democratic alternative school, where I had to be focused on student agency. We still get into the gym, 300 kids once a week, 6th through 12th grade, to make the fundamental decisions of the school. It's a public school in New York State. Our assessments are performance-based, you know, around what drives student engagement and learning, et cetera. But when I started teaching with really diverse students, kids whose parents taught philosophy at Cornell University and kids whose parents and grandparents had never graduated from high school, but who were brilliant, they were taking apart my car. And I could recognize that I needed to teach in a different kind of way. So for me, and I was a media kid, it was bringing media into the classroom to teach history, for instance. So it was literally vinyl records, and then decoding, you know, analyzing and evaluating the messages and connecting it to the history we're studying. It was 16 millimeter film clips. It was 35 millimeter transparencies up on the board. It was expensive. It was hard. It took a lot of time. It is phenomenally, not even exponentially, just infinitely easier now for educators to use media in the classroom to diversify the kind of text, as well as our books and our posters on the wall and our paintings, but to diversify the kinds of text that we use in the classroom and diversify the ways in which students can express themselves, the ways in which we can assess them, et cetera. That is remarkably accessible. At the same time, we also have to be, and this is the change over time, thinking about the unique qualities of these different media forms like AI. And what I heard the young people speaking about was really cueing into, well, here's the benefits of this, and here's the problems with this. I heard Leo speak really clearly too, but I really want to know how this is going to help me and hurt me. We can teach that quality of curiosity by practicing with students, by modeling and having them ask questions about, well, what medium would I use? And why would I use this? And what's the qualities of a puppet show? Or me just talking to the class versus my PowerPoint presentation, or AI, why should I use it and how? We need that to be integrated into the curriculum. We can when we focus on the habits of critical thinking about all forms of media and technology.
Great. That's fascinating. I think just thinking of the setting of this generational space today, this being a youth-led panel, I'm curious, as we close off with our final question, if you your words of wisdom to young people here, and what your advice is of how we can not only be media literate, but also be promoters of media literacy and advocates of media literacy. If you have any final words for us on that.
I am inspired today by listening to the young people before me about what you have to offer in terms of your facility with different media forms, both from an activist perspective, but from a critical thinking perspective, and what we have to offer from a previous generation in doing this work. It is essential that the experts, don't hold on to our view, but that we synthesize what is it that transcends the generations, that is critical to hold on to. What is it that young people and other people understand who are fluent with these different media forms like AI, but not just AI, and how can we collaborate and work together so that we are building a generation of civic ready, college and career ready young people who can be personally empowered, but in the context of their communities and their worlds, so that they are ethical, they are well-reasoned, they are informed, they are self-reflective, they are curious, and are consistently inquiring about these kinds of questions that we have talked about, so that, in the words of Paulo Freire, they can read and write their worlds.
Well, that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you very much for your time today, Chris. It was really wonderful, especially to hear from a fellow upstate New Yorker about your experience leading in this field. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it so much.
Thank you. And now I'll pass it along to fellow students, Cheyenne and Anna.
Hi, thank you, Martine and Chris, for that wonderful interview and dialogue. I'm Anna or Anna, either from Northern Long Island at Wood Noble High School, and I'll be with Cheyenne.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne, a junior from Cardinal Spellman High School.
And today we're actually honored to introduce Commissioner of Education, Betty Rosa. Cheyenne, you want to take it away?
Yeah, she has an amazing backstory. So to start, Dr. Betty Rosa is the first Afro-Latina to hold roles of Commissioner of Education and President of the University of the State of New York. She brings over 30 years of experience to her work. She is known for her dedication to helping all students succeed regardless of their background. Dr. Rosa's academic journey includes earning degrees from Harvard University, and she has received numerous awards for her contributions to education. Her leadership is marked by a commitment to inclusivity and empowerment. With a wealth of experience spanning more than 3 decades in the field of education, Dr. Rosa is widely recognized for her tireless dedication to ensuring every student, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to thrive. Her journey from starting as a teacher's assistant to assuming leadership roles speaks volumes about her commitment to inclusive education and student access.
So, Dr. Rosa, where do you see the intersection of civic education and technology? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. And I got to listen to the previous presenter and was quite absolutely engaged in the conversation and the exchange. And I thought that he absolutely set the stage for the next part of this conversation. So I do see the intersection, as we know that when we think about civic learning, right? we think about our young people, developing, the important piece here is developing, as he also talked about, knowledge, skills, dispositions, and commitment to one of the key things is improving communities, your own communities, right? That you give voice to some of the issues in your own community, which is a starting point for many students. And by your own community, I talk about communities inclusive of your schools, inclusive of your house of worships and other places, right? Where you, as young people, do a great deal of work to think about, to learn, to look at some of the key focus and priorities, and clearly begin to early on do some work in research, facts, create some evidence, and formulate those amazing arguments that you use to give you an opportunity to say, these are the kinds of things that we would like to see, right? You do that in school, you do that in other places. So I think that the participation in your own and our own democracy is a great intersection with having, of course, looking at some of the instructional learning process, some of the instructional technology and accessible tools. And those, you know, those tools allow our young people, the technology, obviously, to use and to enhance the teaching and the learning process. And particularly, I find it's exciting to think about the digital divide, but also generational divide. And how do you get it closer and closer and closer, right? So that with whether it's the new media forms or the way that you use the media to ignite and excite and create the imagination of your own learning. So I think the intersection is access, a way to truly think about some of the facts, way to think about, and by the way, and not beyond the learning, as I said, the knowledge, skills, it really lends itself for innovating, and it lends itself for creativity and problem solving. So I do think that there are some amazing intersections and possibilities.
Thank you, Dr. Rosa, for that amazing answer. The second question is, as we all know, schools are without a doubt struggling with implementing technology into education. Policies such as phone bans, inaccurate AI detection systems, and technology in classrooms post-COVID are particularly contentious. How have you seen the role of technology in the classroom evolve over time? And do you think there's ever been a point of going too far with technology in the classroom?
So I'm going to say that obviously COVID had really many challenges, both emotional, right? A sense of isolation, trauma, and, you know, the disconnect, the human disconnect that took place as a result, right? Places that you were all of us were very comfortable with being part of. All of a sudden, we found ourselves unable to partake in that human connection. And so I think that we pivoted to the use of technology, and we pivoted to a way that we could use technology to continue that human connection and to continue the learning and to continue to engage with each other at a time when it was, from a medical perspective, was quite challenging, right? And so in order for the learning to take place, while I must say we also confronted the digital divide, right? Because the equity issue came into the forefront, particularly for those communities that did not have the resources and the equipment to continue the kind of engagement, the kind of learning that we know was and is essential. So I do think that schools learned many lessons during that period of time, and many lessons that we have incorporated and continue to hold on to as we continue to think about the whole issue of learning, but learning in a way that connects with the way our young people want to learn, need to learn, and are accustomed to. So the educational system, while it pivoted at that time, it needs to hold on to those amazing, valuable lessons, right? It needs to continue to, while there are, as we know, and we need the understanding of the possibilities, we also have to have the understanding of the risks. And we know that the shaping of the future in which technology serves as a tool for human empowerment and support is essential and will continue to be here. And so I truly believe that that was one of the lessons, major lessons, that we took away from the pandemic. And so holding on to that and continuing to think about learning as a 24/7, continuing the expansion of learning, continuing to think about learning in a way that ignites and excites our students to find and to do the kind of research, capstone projects, as many of you do, travel the world without necessarily leaving your own space, connecting with people that in many ways you and I know that if you can't afford to travel to those places, you could still connect. Those are amazing, amazing opportunities. Also learning, taking courses online and being able to incorporate your classroom learning and expanding and extending. I think it's an amazing, amazing way for that learning process to continue as a way to innovate and as a way to help students think about, as I said, the creativity and the problem solving, those things that you love, those things that you engage in school. Just think about getting together with a group of your peers that love a particular area and topic that you want to research, that you want to explore, that you want to really have more knowledge about. That's right now an amazing opportunity, and I consider it almost a gift as a way of using technology to do that.
So, Dr. Rosa, you just talked about all these wonderful opportunities that technology brings to the school system in general. How do you see the civic education curriculum specifically evolving to meet the technology of the future?
Sure. So as I said before, in terms of looking at understanding issues, even simple issues like, for example, in communities, nutrition, right? In communities where you think about ways of mental health, telehealth, right? Or if you think about, for example, I'm going to use a concrete example that happened with me. I was driving to see my mom, and I was driving with my son, who I thought had COVID. So we stopped. I immediately went on telehealth and spoke to a doctor at that point, and I was in North Carolina, got a prescription. He did not have COVID, got a prescription, tested him, and I had my medicine for my son within, like, I would say 45 minutes. So that kind of technology, right? That kind of, and the reason for that, it helps individuals in community, right? To really learn about ways of continuing their health, even when they're traveling. So I see the technology also helping young people think about, look at how much research is being done about weather, about a whole system, and how we can invest and have our young people do some research around the climate change. What an amazing way to engage in this whole notion of civic learning about the kinds of things we need to do in our community to maintain a healthy community, but also our planet, right? The other thing I see is, for example, and we all know that there are many, many challenges because we can reduce errors, like in weather forecasting. Think about weather forecasting as an amazing way. We know a hurricane is coming. We can prepare. And in terms of civic learning, how do we move as a community to support, right, our communities to make sure they have the proper equipment and everything else? What about hazardous situations where we, instead of sending a human into these kinds of situations, we could use robots, right, to go into and maintain the integrity of not risking our humans. Surgery, right? Civic, the doctors that are doing research in helping our young people advocate for some of these ways that we can make this information available. And so these are just some key examples of how I can think of how the intellect of humans connected to machines, right? Connected to our civic commitment and involvement is in that kind of triage is a way to really advance many of the things that we believe keep us responsible for each other.
That was a great answer. I really liked your aspect about saving people and helping people and moving beyond human intellectual abilities. But for our fourth question, we did conduct interviews as a coalition with our peers, and we found that many students feel there is a potential for technology to enhance civic learning, creativity, and social connectivity, like you have stated. However, many students know that the adults in their lives hold misconceptions around technology, as solely it means to cheat or socially isolate. How is the New York State Education Department addressing misconceptions about adults and the use of technology?
Great question. And I will tell you, I'm going to invite everyone after this to go to NYSED and look at our presentation this month, which was on AI, right? And in the presentation, we talked about, obviously the understanding of the possibilities as well as the risks, right? And we talked about the way that in not only just in schools within the P12 space, but the ways that we can begin to educate each other on understanding the benefits, right? As well as the risk, because there are clearly risks involved, right? And I think that sometimes we operate from the risks first rather than the benefits. And so we have young people who want to innovate, and we have sometimes the adult world wants to regulate. And so while we have, for example, one of the conversations we had was about data privacy. We've got to protect our young people in terms of making sure that as they're accessing and using the technology, that we also have parent involvement, parents being very aware of some of the ways that young people can be impacted, not necessarily in a positive way. So this has the opportunity also for, and we talked about it during our Regents meeting, to look at family rights, to look at some of the personal identifiable issues that we want to protect. So, we do have some laws that do that, and we wanted to share that with the public, such as FERPA, the 2D, which is a law that protects personal identifiable information, and COPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and that is extremely important. So in this presentation, which I will ask not just the students that are listening to this, but other individuals that are paying attention, to go in and see some of the work that we're doing around both the AI. And next month, by the way, we have also another presentation, how we use it within the department. But we talked quite a bit about computer science, digital fluency, the learning standards and how they connect. We talked about finding that balance, right? And helping to create the integration of the teaching and learning, and how do we innovate and yet maintaining a cautious view on the ways that it could be misused and the way that this technology, this new media form can be a risk. So it's that whole balance. And obviously we want families to be intimately involved in having a better understanding of the, what we consider to be the possibilities as well as the risks involved.
So, Dr. Rosa, in discussing the integration of technology in schools, can you point to specific and practical examples of measures schools can implement to ensure the responsible use of tech in schools?
Sure. Schools, for the most part, we provide guidance, as you know, right? And you may not know, but we do in the department. So schools do really take the responsibility, for example, of setting up most of you know, you have your student, having been a middle school and high school principal, you produce your student, handbook, right? And in those handbooks, there are explanations of the kinds of things that we want to make sure that students internalize. You have your civic groups, even within schools, that help, your town hall meetings, help inform the students of the kinds of expectations of how to use this media and technology in a constructive kind of way. So schools have a tendency to obviously do the the sharing through different ways, whether they're in classrooms, right? For example, some of you are in classes that are computer, based, and they're doing the computer science and digital fluency learning standards. They go through that and they talk about finding that balance. But even beyond that, I think schools create various opportunities to ensure that students use the the technology both in school and outside of school in a way that really supports the kinds of education and learning process, and can discern from some of the facts and some of the ways that we want students to grow with the technology, but grow with being cautious and being also, there's an awareness, and school is a great place, but also at home. A lot of you also engage with your parents, and if there's a concern, right, you do share some of the concerns with them to make sure that somehow whatever you're reading, whatever you're accessing, are these credible pieces of information? Are these even for your own research, right? You look at it and you think about, is it informing the kind of work that you're doing, whether it's for school or even an organization that you belong as a high school student? Some of you belong to some amazing groups outside, advocacy groups that clearly allow you to participate in your civic, what I call your civic commitment. And I do think that using the technology as a way of interacting with it in a positive kind of way, both in the school as well as in the community, but using guidance and knowing that there are individuals in your schools that, as I know the former presenter, will guide some of and create some of the cautions, as I call it, for you to think about and internalize as you use this new media form.
Rosa, as a follow-up, do you believe, besides handbooks and caution, that there should be safeguards implemented or for safe technology use, and if so, at what levels, whether that be teachers or policymakers, should those be implemented?
Well, we do them at all levels. I mean, you're going to see them obviously at the state level. We go through those. That's why, the presentation we had, we do them at the district level. Your superintendents and your principals obviously are involved with that. We do them at the parent association levels, right? They engage with the school districts. And then you have, if you belong to various organizations, they too have that kind of, the structural protocols and guidance to ensure that you begin to internalize, what are the expectations, how you're using them to inform whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's writing a research paper all the way through to engaging in research to with a group of students and getting the kind of information that obviously you're going to incorporate into that research, as well as from a consumer perspective, right? It's also learning how to properly help, if you're involved in helping others in the community, how to make sure that the information that's being shared is validated. It's absolutely the kind of information that has been researched and can stand the test, as we say in schools, to make sure that it's factual and not going to create a kind of a narrative that has misconceptions and misinformation. So I think all those, you've got different places, and in some cases even in some of the volunteer work that you do, where you're working with, especially if you're working with the technology to inform the work that you're going to be doing for that organization, there are people that will help you through and guide that kind of work as well.
Okay, that was an amazing answer. I know for one of the previous questions, you talked about how the board has recently talked a lot about AI.
Yep.
So what other topics, or maybe even if you want to expand on that, what topics in technology and media literacy has the Board of Regents focused on in recent conversations, and how might they enhance civic engagement among students?
Okay, so we talked, and when you go on the P12 presentation, which by the way, we had during the presentation, we had various districts, individuals from various districts, all the way from New York City to Syracuse, really sharing with us some of the work that they're doing at the district and school level as well. So they talked about instructional, the instructional technology. They talked about accessible tools that are used within the school. They also shared with us AI, and again, the challenges and the possibilities, the risk, generative AI, distinction between AI, which is the understanding of these possibility and risk, as well as how generative AI is being used, shaping the future in which technology serves as a tool for human empowerment, which is really, you talk about civic, right, that intersection. It's having it so that it's human-centric, right, so that people can use these opportunities, whether it's through surgery, through some of the other ways, to really minimize the human error that happens in some of these issues. We talked about the way that, and you'll see it, the way that the technology is helping students take classes all over the world, and the way that it's being used for students to share in some places where they don't have a teacher to teach a particular subject area, where there's a shared learning opportunity by perhaps having the students take the course, you know, during the school day, but another university professor or another teacher teaching the class. So there was a lot of crossing over and exchanging as a way of empowering the learning opportunities. So what you will see in the presentation are really the new way that learning can take place 24/7, but more importantly, the way that schools are going to transformation to support the same transformation that our young people are going through, so that we can catch up with your needs and kind of really make sure we align the opportunities and your learning styles and your learning process and the way you process information that is very different from some of the adults that are obviously engaging with you. So it's really the way that the department is looking at AI and the way that the districts are looking at AI and generative AI is also a way to really advance the information that's out there, but making sure that we are helping to shape that future by having you have the best information and the best knowledge of the technology so that we can empower our young people to use this as a tool for human centric progress.
With that inspiring note, we're actually going to pivot to a question asking what your plans are considering the school's staffing shortage among librarians and teachers, and how that staffing shortage might impact the implementation of media literacy curriculum.
Sure. So one of the ways that we're looking at is looking at the pipeline, obviously looking at including some of the barriers that we know have impeded individuals coming into the teaching profession. So that's one way, right? So obviously certification, you guys wouldn't, that's a whole different topic, but really being much more inclusive, much more open about some of these barriers that have not helped to bring talented individuals into the profession. So we're doing some of that work. But at the level of looking at the shortage of individuals, it's how do we take the existing teachers and resources and talent that we have and use the technology, right, to share that talent? What are the ways that, for example, if you live, let's say, in a rural community, and there's another young lady who lives, let's say, in an urban, and there's a teacher that's either in an urban, suburban, or rural, how do we share those resources? How do we find ways of not only just eliminating the barriers and bringing more people into the space, into our teaching profession, but also making it, creating the pathway for sharing the resources that we currently have. Because remember, if you took a course in algebra or geometry, you usually had the teacher in the classroom as your algebra geometry teacher. But now we have a lot of professors, we have a lot of teachers out there, so that we can use that technology as a way of importing that individual into the classroom where there may be a shortage for that content area. So it's really, in many ways, it's innovating, it's being creative, and helping to fill the shortage area at the same time that we are opening it up to the talent that's out there and eliminating, as I said, the various barriers that keep many people from coming into the profession. And the one thing we want to do, and I always say this, it's not just about recruiting, it's also about retaining. So we want to make sure that as we are bringing people into the profession, that we're preparing them to be successful, because it's just as important to go beyond the recruiting. It's just as important to retain them in the profession and engage them and get them as excited as our students are, and as excited as those teachers that are in love with teaching and learning every single day.
Thank you. Now we're pivoting to actually hopefully similarly relevant and timely question from our audience, which reads, Commissioner Rosa, I love your focus on using civics and tech in local communities. Given that technology brings the global into the home with tremendous ease, what specific things do you think we need to do to keep from losing sight of local communities?
Well, I think the important issue is sometimes to localize a lot of times we don't take stock of our own community and the talents that are in our own community, but also the challenges, right, that are in our own community. For example, sometimes you grow up in a certain community, but you don't realize the surrounding community really creates an opportunity for DEI, for diversity, for equity and inclusion, right? So it's expanding that to allow individuals to realize that the connectivity, the human connectivity extends beyond your own small community that you may be a part of. And so that you as an individual and a group, it's an opportunity to also think about how do you learn and get to know perhaps a community that you are not a part of, but learn more about it and become that much more engaged in perhaps even having your community connect, or a small group of individuals connect with that neighboring community, and realizing that sometimes you're more alike than you realize, right? So I do believe that first and foremost, understanding, the nucleus of the family, then looking at your own community, but also thinking about your surrounding communities and expanding that. And how do you grow from having a broader understanding? And I truly believe DEI is a wonderful opportunity to do that, through diversity, understanding different cultures, different languages, different ways that people have, and internalize their own understanding of language and culture.
Thank you so much. Actually, now we'd like to invite Chris Sperry back to the Q&A to actually answer the same question in how we're able to connect communities through technology.
Right.
Okay, I'm back. So wonderful, Commissioner Rosa, to hear so many insights on so many different issues. I'll say I'm not sure in terms of the technology connection explicitly, but I know that democracy and civics also has to start in our schools, in our communities. And it needs to start with how we interact with young people, and the importance of the communities in our schools valuing the agency and the voice of our students and their thinking. And there's lots of ways in which we can use technology as tools to achieve that as well. But I think if students get a sense from the youngest age that they have voice and they have agency, that what they think matters, that their opinions matter, and that the information that they're responsible for has an application, that they're ethically responsible for helping their fellow human beings, that we need to build that throughout the curriculum of the school and the structure of the school, and the pedagogy, the ways in which we teach that reflect that civic orientation and the 21st century skills that we need for students to deeply evaluate, reflect on, and act on well-reasoned and self-reflective information.
So can I jump in and tell you that as you were speaking to that issue, one of the ways, and you can actually go on, people can go on our website. When we did the BRC, right, which is our grad measures, right, and our Blue Ribbon Commission, students were very much a part of that commission. Right. And not only were they part, as you know, of that commission, but their voices were probably the most powerful. So when we came up with the 12, the 12 items, they talked about, many of them talked about graduation and what they saw it as the, as we call it, they reference the issue of the portrait of the graduate. What does that look like? They've referenced the issue of financial literacy, that the importance of having that. They reference the importance of a sense of belonging and having places that allow them, to your point, to have a voice in the decisions and having ownership. They were the core of the BRC. Their voices were captured. The adults participated, listened to, we had amazing groups of students throughout the entire state. We made sure that, their voices were heard. Now I'll give you a second one. The second one is My Brother's Keeper, as you know, MBK. Those students constantly have presentations. Those students constantly engage in having opportunities to share with us not only their own sense of owning the responsibility of being their brother's keeper or their sister's keeper, but also they're helping us to understand how do we advance the kinds of guidance, the kinds of decision making that truly looks at what is it that they're interested. What is it that they're telling us? This is what our world looks like. This is how we want you to help us advance and give voice to. So we have had several, over the last several years, several initiatives that the students have been, I will tell you, the most amazing part of the conversations. Those are just two that I can tell you that and you can go on our website and watch the videos. They were spectacular. They were absolutely, when I tell you that we walked away and said, my God, not only is there hope, but the fact that these young people were able to articulate their sense about their experiences in high school and courses and the Regents exam and the content and the capstone projects and how they felt about the issues of supporting each other and on and on and on. We know that our world is in great hands in terms of the future for not only our society, but also our world.
I'm just gonna quickly jump in. Forgive me but I just want to say, Commissioner, I love the passion and the sense of how important it is to listen to students. I just got back before this from being a rater for performance-based assessment tasks at our local school. And similarly, anybody who would have seen, wow, this is students demonstrating their deep engagement, their voice, how excited they were to dive into research and to present to their peers and to these outside raters and to interact. We haven't talked much about the issue of assessment, but the relationship of assessment to civics in terms of how we can shift to a 21st century orientation towards assessing students' ability to be engaged with their own learning and have ownership fits really well with everything that you're talking about.
Right. And by the way, the focus of accountability was on ability, not so much on the accounting from the students' voices. They were very much a part of talking about help us to create multiple pathways, different ways of assessing us, different ways of demonstrating what we know, to your point. We have a couple of pilots on performance-based. The students spoke about help us to have not only a highway of learning, but the thing that I found particularly exciting and ignited my passion was when they talked about make help us make school or schooling a place where you open up the walls, where you get rid of some of these barriers, time constraints, and all of these structural things that get in the way of having us, really truly allowing us to be creative and do problem solving. That was creativity and problem solving was on the top of their list. It became the top of our list. So their voices and their needs and their articulation of what was important to them in terms of, yes, hold us accountable, but at the end of the day, make sure that not only do you give us the tools, but that you create and help us create the pathway to these possibilities. More than glad, it is on our website. If you go to the BRC, I hope the students will also. Their voices were so much a part of this, and as I said, it's same thing with MBK. That it not only excites me, as you could hear me, but the entire 70 members were absolutely grateful and just really truly felt that this was an incredible, powerful year listening to our students' voices to ensure that as we move forward, it's about them. It's not about the adults.
Thank you so much, Chris and Dr. Rosa. I think that's the end of our audience Q&A and the end of its panel. So sincerely, thank you so much for all your insights. And now I'm going to hand it off to Katie Luce, our wonderful leader, to make some closing statements about this great experience.
Yeah, thank you to all the panelists and our wonderful youth moderators. This has been just an incredible lineup, from youth activists to moving into an educator with Chris and Commissioner Rosa. Wow, I'm just so impressed with you all. So I'm really quick gonna share my screen with you. And thank you to our audience, of course, for joining tonight's event as a part of New York Civic Learning Week. If you're inspired to take action on the subject of media literacy in New York State, you can scan this QR code here, and this bill, S8217, it will require all New York students to have access to a quality media literacy education. Requires school library media skills, each elementary, intermediate, middle school, junior high, senior high, as well as a media literacy advisory committee. So if you have a chance, do scan the code and take action. It's a great way if you're feeling inspired.